the Pittsburgh Current podcast. I am editor and publisher Charlie Deach, and I am. Oh, sorry.
Let's start from the top.
Forget it all happened. Hi, this is Charlie Deach with the Pittsburgh Current podcast. I'm glad that I'm not doing the whole show alone today because I apparently am getting tongue-tied and a little twisted up. Today on our show, we have my partner in business, and it seems like my partner in life as much time as we spend together at this point, Bethany Rue, associate publisher of the Pittsburgh Current, and special effects genius / guru and neighbor to the Current, Steve Tolin. Just a little bit of background, I guess, or a little roundup on what you can find at pittsburghcurrent.com before we get started today. We have kind of breaking news that we published late last night. Involves the future of the Silkscreen Film Festival. And for those of you who don't know, Silkscreen is a film festival, one of the few, certainly the only one in this region, and one of the few in the country that celebrates film from Asian film from different directors and stuff from around the world. However, the festival ended this past Sunday, and by Tuesday, the business had shut down, decided to cease operations, and this comes. They say it's for the official statement is for financial reasons. However, it came amid some very serious allegations of sexual harassment and workplace harassment by the executive director of Silkscreen. So we have that on pittsburghcurrent.com. We talked to some former employees, and we talked to Mayor Bill Peduto, who was an advisory board member of Silkscreen. And once he found out what was going on right before the festival, he actually boycotted their major event, their gala that opened the film festival. So you should definitely check out that story on pittsburghcurrent.com. In other news, I want to thank, since we're here at Sorgatron Media, I want to thank the Sorgs for inviting us to Pittsburgh PodCon this past weekend. We were there at Spirit in Lawrenceville. It was a great time, and I think a lot of people really enjoyed it. It was a really great event. I think a lot of us didn't know what to expect, but it was a lot of fun. We got to meet a lot of great people, a lot of people who were also in podcasting, and so it was a really great event. And I got to finally be on the Wrestling Mayhem podcast, which was been one of my lifelong dreams. And hopefully I will be invited back. With that, I'm going to throw it over to my partner, Bethany Rue. Being a Beachview native, Bethany is definitely she's the person to know on all things Beachview, which means she has known the Tolins for some time. And so we're going to turn it over to Bethany to take the show from here.
Thank you, Charlie. And I should say I've known of the Tolins for a long time.
Excuse me.
And I'm very excited to have Steve here with me today. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, thank you for kind of agreeing to come on.
Yeah.
So for those of you guys that might not know, Steve Tolin is the owner, proprietor, and head genius in charge of Tolin FX, which is a special effects shop that is located right next to us, and it's more than special effects, as anybody that walks past your building knows. You guys have some crazy things going on. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about you and what you guys do over there?
So we do special effects for film and television and theater, and we have grown into doing some museum work, but we also do private commission. Really what we're doing is custom design and fabrication, which applies to anybody's creative endeavor that needs some kind of focused attention on a portion of it that we can make awesome for them, whether it is a cell phone case for their mom, or a monster for your movie, or blood effects for your theater show, whatever it is. If you have some sort of creative challenge that you can't overcome, I am definitely ready to put my head against it. And we're even entering sort of invention territory and helping people realize any kind of creative idea that they might have. I think that is one of the greatest powers that we have as human beings, is the ability to take an idea and turn it into a real thing. And that's really what drives me, is creating things that I've never created before, whether it's for a movie or whether it's just for somebody that I just met.
So it's like problem solving at like a super awesome creative level.
Yeah, coming from all kinds of different angles. You know, we really lean on a lot of technology. We have a lot of 3D printers and CNC routing kind of capabilities, but we also sculpt, characters and props out of clay. You know, so we're sticks and dirt, and we're laser beams and 3D printers.
I did not know you had a 3D printer. Like, say if
Multiple.
you had a neighbor that was like a media publication, and one of them wanted to have something 3D printed. Like,
We would be the people to call.
Yes,
Yeah.
awesome.
And
Okay.
and we're not just doing the 3D printing. So you could have like a flat vector artwork, and you could say, hey, I would like to see this in the third dimension, and we can do all the computer work that takes that idea and brings it out as a 3D print. And a 3D print, everybody thinks about 3D printing as sort of the replicator on Star Trek, and it's not like that. It's what you get is a raw piece that requires some finish work and those kind of things. We're always trying to achieve higher resolution. We just got a printer yesterday called the Milkshake, which is an SLA printer, like an emulsion type printer. It's
That's hilarious.
yeah, it's cool. It's got a really big bed, so we can do high volume production, but the resolution is really fine. So the finish work is really reduced, but it's still there. Like, it's not, the computer is not an artist. It requires an artist to utilize that tool the same as a fan brush or the canvas or anything like that.
So like your average person could just walk up and fiddle with it and print out something, super amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
So
you could
still
come
have
up and
you
press
still
the
need
button.
human artistry behind it. I could press a button.
Yeah, anyone could run the print. That part is easy. Anyone could put the filament in, and because basically most 3D printers are like a hot glue gun. It's basically just a computer-controlled hot glue gun. If you were focused and a machine, you could conceivably make a coffee cup with a hot glue gun. But if you give that control to a computer, now it just takes the human element out of that part of it. But it's still an artist to design what that cup is going to look like and do the finish work on it once it comes out, because there's even just resolution lines or something like that. Not to mention if you want to do cosmetic decoration to it or something like that, you have to. It's a full process. It's not just all you're doing is creating the 3D asset with a printer.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
And
Steve, I'm sorry, Steve. What's one of the strangest things that anyone's ever asked you to make? Is there anything that they've asked you to make 3D wise that's just, I don't know, either funny or maybe disturbing? Illegal. Yeah, is that great?
Yeah. I mean, we've made all kinds of stuff. Some of it has been illegal, but that was on me, and that wasn't really for. I mean, it was technically for somebody, but the illegal act was on me. But anyways.
Wow, fantastic.
we're not.
But I would say, if I thought about the strangest thing, there was a CMU play that was put on where it was a production of Lord of the Flies, and they wanted the pig to be made out of sex dolls. So we made a prop pig that was 100% made out of different parts of sex dolls, that like blow-up dolls.
Yeah.
That then was stuffed, and we had made all this silk intestines, and it was really neat. It was all very abstracted, but that was a very bizarre request.
I haven't seen that one hanging in your workshop, Steve.
No, I think it was so coveted that we didn't get it back, and it was covered in stage.
Oh, at CMU, people kept the sex dolls.
Yeah.
I also do want to point out that people can ask questions live. Mike Sorg here at Sorgatron Media will moderate if anybody does have a question for Steve or me or Charlie. So feel free to ask those on Facebook Live. And I do also want to point out, follow us and Steve on social media. We're Pittsburgh Current on all of our channels, and he's Tolin FX on all of his. So I do have to point out that, this is somebody that does walk past your shop every day. I know you guys do a lot of special effects work too. I mean, that's, for different movies and films. And, I was just recently at a PTA event with Steve where he had a table full of severed limbs that the children were just going nuts over.
It's important to give back.
Yeah, it is. They were touching them, and yeah,
It's hard for me if somebody says, "Hey, will you come show the little kids all the monsters and severed heads and stuff?" And nothing is really off limits except for sexual innuendo.
Yeah.
Then
well,
and I can bring severed heads and stuff. I'll show up.
Well, they had us there with the Current, and I was like, "Please don't look at the Spearmint Rhino ad, and do not read Dan Savage. This is for your parents. Stay in school."
Yeah,
exactly. So no, it was great to see you there, and but could we talk for a little bit about because unless you live in a hole, it is the 50th anniversary of Night of the Living Dead. There's a lot of stuff going on across the city. Also, Steve just told me 40th anniversary of Dawn of the Dead. So let's talk a little bit about that special effects aspect. The main question I have for you is, at what point in your life were you like, I want to make it look like people have just been gruesomely murdered?
I think that part is just like common to most adolescent boys, and I think that the outlet for me in terms of bringing it out creatively, for a long time, I'm from West Virginia, and I've told this story before, but for a long time they did not tell me that I could be an artist. You know, I was told, oh, that's really cool, but put that away. It's math time. You know, that kind of stuff. And I didn't even realize that being a professional artist was an option. And then, to West Virginia's credit, they had a West Virginia Governor's School for the Arts that was for sophomores in high school, that was all expenses paid, that was a 3-week intensive study in your field. So if you, it was music and dance and visual art, and if you were able to go through a portfolio review process and you were selected, I think it was like 75 students out of all those different disciplines were chosen out of a bunch of thousands of kids, you would go, and when I went to this thing, it just completely changed my mind. Not only did they tell me that I could be an artist, but they showed me all these different ways that that could come to fruition. And while I was there, special effects kind of came up, and it hadn't ever, you know, when I would watch movies, I was transported into the movie. I wasn't thinking about who made the movie or about the camera angles or any of that kind of crap. I was watching the story. I was totally engrossed in the story. So, you know, at the same time I'm being introduced to visual art as a career, I am understanding the fourth wall and the idea that people are making these movies, and that is one of the outlets that I could utilize. And I was going to be a biologist. Up to that point, I was going to be a biologist like my old man, and I love animals, I love nature, and I think that we're all part of a bigger picture in regards to the ecology that we're a part of. Anyway, so when that applies to art, really what that had me doing as a little kid was training my art skills through drawing animals, sculpting animals. You know, it was always expressed through animals in some way. And so I was one of the few people who just jumped into secondary education. I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, not really having any idea what was expected of a makeup effects artist or what a career in that field actually looked like. It sounded cool to me. It sounded like I was basically going to be reverse engineering animals. You know, I've always loved monster movies. That's my favorite favorite genre. It's creature comedies. You know, Gremlins and Harry and the Hendersons, those kind of movies are my very favorite. And so when I think about making those kind of creatures and those kind of characters, that's what made me want to go to art school. And when I was there, it just ended up being a perfect fit because it's all of the things that interest me combined.
So it wasn't really like the blood and gore aspect of it. It was really the humanity behind the kind of monster kind of thing.
Yeah, and even with the blood and gore, I mean, most of the time when I'm asked to do a job like that, I don't really care about the trauma as much as it's almost like, to me, if you can understand the anatomy of a vehicle well enough that you can show what it looks like after it just had a head-on collision, you know what would happen to the water pump and what would happen to the engine based on like what it's made out of and where it is in the car and like what would happen to the belts. If you could sculpt what a car looks like after it's been destroyed, I think that demonstrates a really high understanding of anatomy. And that's one of the things that really drives me about blood and gore stuff, is really just about the anatomical study.
Right.
You know, so that it's more than just that, because there's also an artistic spin on it. So you've never seen anybody shot in the movies how somebody actually gets shot. You've never seen anybody get stabbed, what that looks like. You've never, you know, like what we think it looks like is not what it looks like.
Well, I mean, it's not like you can exactly get a case study going.
Well, I mean, I kind of have. I mean,
focus
I'm from
group.
West Virginia, and I have shot a lot of stuff. And I'm here to tell you that I have seen it happen. Maybe not with human beings, but with a lot of animals. And it is not what you think. So what you're trying to do, though, storytelling, again, what we're trying to do is tell a story. We're not trying to, it's not an anatomical study on what happens when you cut somebody's throat. It's in this moment when this thing happens to this character, what do we want our audience to feel? You know, is it a moment where some villain has been finally killed, you know, like a Sweeney Todd kind of a thing? Or, you know, Sweeney Todd is actually even a strange show because you're not sure how you're supposed to feel about that. You know, we're doing Sweeney Todd right now at Lincoln Park Performing Arts Center, where they're teching this week. Mercedes and Devin are going up there every night and spraying blood all over their stage.
When's opening night for that?
October 5th.
All right. So
yeah, that's Friday.
That's Friday. So Friday, guys. All right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's October 5th. Double check Lincoln
I'll
Park.
Google it. I'll do the Googles.
That's Lincoln Park in Midland, PA.
That's it. Yeah. And, you know, Justin, the director of that show, has really an elevated idea of what he wants his show to be. So he brought us on. He has this awesome stage. I don't know where he got it, but it's got everything you would expect from a Sweeney Todd with the chair and all the stuff. It's super cool. Wow. But, you know, with something like that with Sweeney Todd, that's great because you're on this emotional roller coaster the whole time. You don't know whether you hate or love Sweeney Todd. You're rooting for him and singing his songs at one point, you know, and then he kills the judge and suddenly you're okay
Spoiler
with that.
alert. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, everybody knows Sweeney Todd. I mean, come on. Here goes another spoiler alert again, I guess, for people.
Cover your ears if
anybody
you don't
who's
wanna know.
been, cover your ears. Is that Sweeney dies at the end, and now you feel horrible. So the exact same special effect, literally, we're putting the exact same special effect on the two different people, and as the audience, you feel completely different about it, depending on how the whole thing is staged and the theatrics of it.
Well, so that brings up a good point. How deeply and how intertwined is the work that you and your team do with like the artistic director or the director? I mean, like so you're not just coming in and slapping these things on as like an add-on. I mean, to what extent are you involved in, how embedded are you, not just in the plays, but in the movies and even with your client work? Like, how deep do you have to go to be able to deliver like that?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of up to them. I mean, I produce a line of rigs that create the illusion of people being shot or stabbed, this kind of thing, called SquibFX. You can check us out on SquibFX.com. And in my shirt. And so what those do is it creates those illusions safely. So we're using air and batteries rather than explosives. Traditionally, it's done with explosives. And so what that allows us to do is just hand the thing off. So someone can go on our website and just buy this and use it in their play or their movie or something like that. It comes with a bunch of instructions, and we do tech support and stuff like that. But sometimes what people want is the design aspect of it. They don't want to just buy something that we have off the shelf. They want every moment in the show. They want to explain to me the emotional moment they're trying to create, and then I'm bringing my piece of the puzzle to that. But this is one of the things I love about movies and theater is that it's a collaborative artwork. If I just wanted to paint, I'd paint in my basement, I guess. But
Probably
the
not good
collaboration, the community. Yeah, I got pretty good lighting in my basement.
I don't know why my painting sucks so bad.
Well, I worked out of my basement for 15 years. The first 15 years of me doing this was not in a
Wasn't in
a
the
fancy
giant palatial
shop.
place you have now up the street.
No, I was in my basement for 15 of those years, and
We
so
started
the
in, like,
lighting is
kitchens
actually pretty good.
different. Yeah, awesome.
But my point is that the collaboration of it and the community of it is part of what drives it for me. And so one of the really fun moments there is in the interaction with like the costume designer, because you put one of these apparatuses on somebody, and if it was like Brecht, you would just see the thing, But so now it's the costume designer who's going to hide it for me. So Sweeney Todd, it's all tight-fitting Victorian, and we're using the costume to help guide part of the special effects. So they are actually integral in what we're doing, and not just that, but if you spray stage blood in the air and you do not pump light from behind it towards the audience, backlight it. If you don't backlight it, it disappears. You can side light it, you can top light it, you can do anything you want, and it will not show up. It'll just disappear. If you watch any Quentin Tarantino movie, you will see that there is a special, I'm sure it's like a 1K, that is hidden off camera, that once the blood goes airborne, it becomes this glorious thing. So just that moment alone, like I could bring my A game, the costume designer could bring their A game, and if you don't backlight it, you're not going to see it in the air. You'll only see it when it hits a canvas. So that's sort of, it becomes this whole dance, not just, so that's the director's challenge, right? Is that he's got to tell me what he wants the blood to look like. I need to tell the costumer what I need from them to make that happen. But the director wants to talk to the costumer about what he needs creatively just from a costume standpoint. And the costumer is an artist too, and they're going to want to create the costumes that they feel are appropriate for the show. And then they want me to adjust my design to fit their design. And that back and forth and that collaboration is what is so cool.
And it's so interesting too to hear you sort of explain this process, because I know as a consumer of theater and of movies, it's not, you don't always stop to think like, I wonder what went into that. You're just enjoying it and you're in the moment. And that's what you want people to do. I mean, you don't want them to sit there and dissect how it happened.
Yeah, unless they're in the movie business or whatever. And
Well,
then they're like, oh, that was cool. I wonder how they did that.
That was
whatever.
so backlit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's how we do, because we constantly always have a movie sort of playing in the background. And Quentin is one of our big go-tos, because I feel like he's and when you talk about Quentin Tarantino, he is a director. I don't know if his success is in backlighting it or in bringing artists together who he doesn't put the reins on them, because basically what you're talking about is Greg Nicotero and K&B FX Group. Those guys are the ones doing all of Quentin's stuff. And so I'm sure I could totally see Greg saying, yo, guys, you got to backlight that blood or we're never going to see it. And Quentin saying, yeah, listen to the man. He knows what he's talking about, and the lighting designer. Or maybe it didn't even get that way, because Quentin knows to hire a cinematographer who knows to backlight airborne fluids.
Yeah, I think at this point in his career, Quentin probably has some concept.
Steve, what's your favorite Tarantino movie, either as a movie as a whole, or the best effects or effects that really impressed you?
I would say the best movie as a whole, and I think probably just mostly because of the impression it made on me as a kid, was Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, me too.
You know, but also technically, it is, from a blood standpoint, is really cool for a reason you wouldn't really typically think about, which is the reason that I think that their highest achievement was Kill Bill, which is that to track all, like, we don't shoot a movie chronologically, and even if a director goes out of the gate and the AD department is 100% on board with shooting everything shot by shot chronologically, I'm here to tell you that does not happen.
Right.
Because what happens is, and rightfully so, you hit a point in the day where you hit some kind of snag where you didn't know that something was going to do something that you didn't plan on. Even as simple as someone had to go to the bathroom at a moment that you needed them on set. You know what I mean? So now, while you're waiting for that person, what do? Do we all just stand there and wait? Or do you start making productive use of your time? And what can happen is making productive use of your time can either knock you off chronologically or spin you off in this totally different direction, meaning that every movie is shot totally out of order, which means a scene like Uma Thurman chopping up all those people in that restaurant is unbelievable, not just because every single one of those shots was given as individual due justice on screen, but also, you know, so that the moment where an arm gets severed was planned and looks beautiful. You know, I would love to be in the room hearing Greg talk about how to design that stuff.
Yeah.
But then once it has happened, that person you have to track. So now the next person is going to get chopped up. But the problem is you shot that 2 days ago, and you needed to already know what the blood was going to look like on the floor from the person's whose arm you just now chopped off.
Wow.
But you don't know what that's going to look like. You're going to guess, and you're going to put that on the floor. And then on the day that you actually get that arm chopped off, you're going to do your best to try to create that, and then hope that the audience can suspend their disbelief in between those minor variances, like, you know, the water glass that's going up and down throughout the scene. Everyone talks about those kind of continuity errors. When it comes to blood, because blood is like a speck of it walking through it on the set. You've got a set on a Tarantino set, hundreds of people. Right. And, you know, you can't track any of that blood anywhere. And if any of it gets moved, you have to be able to tell where it went. Anyway, I think that from a blood effect slinging standpoint, that was their highest achievement.
I think a lot of people know that scene. So how long would it take, do you think, to shoot a scene like that? I mean, because we're talking about,
Weeks.
I mean, there were, yeah, right. I mean, it's so, like you said, each individual fight or dismemberment or whatever right there is kind of done. Like that could be like a day shoot or something, or half a day shoot.
Yeah, or you would dedicate, maybe there's two special blood gags that you want to get and you would probably get those in the morning because you're multiple takes on the same gag. So that's the other thing too. Okay,
they're called gags.
Yeah, a lot of times people will call it like a blood gag, like the illusion, like even as simple as a lamp falling over. Sometimes we'll go to the special effects department because they got to put the monofilament, and they'll call that a gag. Okay. Or somebody kicks through a door. They never actually kick through a door. Even if it's a breakaway, you usually have some kind of special effects assistant either pulling on it or blowing on it with air or explosive, something like that. And they would call that a gag too. So yeah, blood gags are usually synonymous with blood special effects. Oh. We call them blood FX, but that's mostly for the SEO when it comes to the internet.
You are full of information.
Well, we're just talking as a gag.
Oh, so what are, I mean, obviously everybody knows like the Tarantinos and, the big names. Are there any maybe like lesser known people that you really admire and look up to that some, that you would encourage people to check out if they wanted to sort of either learn more about it or just see some masters at work? I mean, is there anybody that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, most people really know most of the masters, but when I say that now, having done this for 20 years, but I remember a day at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh where one of my teachers, Dave Pence, wanted us to, because he could sniff the kids out who had no idea what they were doing at this school. They're like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. My mom could write the check. I had to go to school, and he knew. And so he's trying to find the ones to put his energy into, is what it felt like to me. So he'd go around and he'd say, tell me who in your industry, because it was industrial design at the time. So a lot of people I was going to school with were toy designers or car designers. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so multidisciplined, is that I'm coming from an industrial design background, not a special effects background. But he said, tell us about, one of the masters that you look up to and why you like their work. And I was like, oh no, I don't know anybody. I can't think of anybody. And so I pontificated about something about how you don't want to be regurgitating other people's work, so you don't want to like, focus too much on what other people are doing, and I prefer to focus on my own stuff or whatever, some bullshit answer, But
I don't know what I'm talking about.
but even I, who like am really interested in this, didn't know any of the masters. So having said that, what I would say is some of the masters that I really admire, that most people already know of, and this is largely represented actually by like a row of photographs in my office. Are people like Da Vinci, obviously, Stan Winston, Jim Henson, and these are all dead people, of course.
Nobody alive is worth liking.
Well, I'll get to that list in a minute. Fred Rogers, August Wilson, George Romero, obviously, and all for the same reasons, which is, people give me a hard time about this sometimes, but I feel like I keep going back to this, to the idea of what am I doing? Like, what is the point of my life? And to me, it's to love the people that I love and to create the things that I can, and that whole list of people that I just described are people who were interested in both of those things. Stan Winston was one of the first people to create real employees with healthcare and that kind of thing in the special effects business. Nobody was asking him to do that. Everyone was working out of their garages, huffing spray paint all day. Seriously, like the legit guys. Like think about The Thing. I mean, I think they had Botine in a corner. They certainly didn't have a spray booth for him. You know what I mean? And so somebody like that completely changes an industry. He's one of the first people to ever ask $1 million for a dinosaur. And that kind of elevated the whole industry. He and Rick Baker campaigned for an Oscar to exist in makeup effects at all. So you're talking about people who created opportunity for the rest of us in a way that we never had seen it before. So like somebody like Greg Nicotero and Howard Berger, who are running KMB, who have, I don't know if Howard actually trained under Stan, as far as I know. I don't know if they worked with Rick. I'm sure they did. I think all those guys worked together. But, they're winning Oscars based on the groundwork that these other people laid in front of us. And when I look at their work, what I see is a higher level of achievement. And when I talk about living masters, obviously Rick Baker is the very top of that list. Richard Taylor at Weta, I don't think gets his just desserts at all, because I think he is probably the modern master. I would put him definitely at the level of Rick Baker. And of course, Steve Johnson is still kicking, and he is a creative genius. He is somebody who some people would are nervous about working with him sometimes, just because he writes books about why, because I think that when you get a unique lens like that you're looking at the world through, it changes the way you look at a lot of stuff, and creative geniuses can sometimes be loose cannons, but if you look at his work, it is off the charts.
No, I couldn't help but notice, as you did rattle off that very impressive list, not a lot of ladies.
Yeah, there's really, it's not fair.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's indicative of a lot of things.
Beth Hathaway is the top female in this industry that I have seen. And I had the good fortune of working with her on The Haunting Hour. She probably doesn't remember me, but I was just a kid, like in my early 20s, and K&B came to Pittsburgh. They had helped to campaign to bring The Haunting Hours to Pittsburgh, and they were doing all the makeup effects, and I don't know how this happened, because I was not even in the union, but I became the SFX, which is a different department, believe it or not. Makeup effects and SFX are different. SFX are blowing stuff up, making it rain, making it snow, and makeup effects are usually making monsters or gluing rubber onto people's faces. And so they show up with this amazing monster, and I'm working literally side by side with the first day on set. Was side by side with Greg while he brought in monster arm down that ripped a door off of a car that I had designed this rig to rip the door off the car. And Beth was there for that whole thing, and she was this, as I see most women who are in this industry that I have witnessed, who are awesome at what they're doing, are always the people who are like really focused on what they're doing and are really zeroed in on their job and are not the ones goofing off all the time on set and whatever. They're like doing their job and they're serious about it. And I'm lucky to have some of those in my shop too.
Well, yeah, I know. I've seen a lot of female representation come in and out of your shop by proximity. I'm your neighbor. But it was interesting when you did have your table at that elementary school. There was girls 3 and 4 deep, like picking up the severed limbs and touching the severed head. And, so parents, if you're listening and you've got some daughters, encourage them to maybe explore special effects, because it seems like there's some job openings for strong females. Totally. But we have Steve here, who's obviously does a lot of outreach in the community. And do you hire like Art Institute kids, or where do you kind of find the next up and coming crop of special effects artists that I know you have working over there for you?
Yeah, I don't do tons of recruitment. A lot of people are interested in special effects, and so it generally starts with an apprenticeship at my shop. So most people who have worked at my shop, who currently work at my shop, showed up and said, I'm interested in special effects. I just went to school for special effects, or I always thought it would be cool, or I'm 13 and I think this might be a cool job for me. And I say, okay, well, if you want to come in and learn special effects, you can trade me your sweat for the knowledge, and you'll ruin my materials and ruin my projects, and I'll teach you how to do this, but I'll make a couple bucks on the things that you do get successful. And then eventually that, I have a number of managers that I work with that I cannot run my shop without. Kyle Roberts is at the very top of that list. Mercedes Link. She runs all of SquibFX. Every squib that is made, Mercedes makes. And she is multi-talented in a lot of different art forms. She's a great sculptor and painter. And Devin Seaman, who is sort of a technical genius. He does a lot of animatronics, and he does a lot of our computer work. And he's one of these half in a virtual, half in a physical world, which is great because that allows us to utilize a lot of different tools. And Kyle, manages all the projects, and he's our sculptor. So pretty much every single sculpture that comes out of my shop, Kyle has sculpted. Plus, he's managing all these teams of people. So basically, what happens is those three and I sit down and we say, okay, it's been whatever 3 months, 6 months. This person's been an apprentice. Should we offer them a couple bucks for the work they're doing? And we're like, I don't know, man. It's still looking a little hairy. Or they're like, yeah, dude. I mean, he or she came through on this job, and then they did this, and yeah, I mean, it's time. And then we'll start paying them, and not as an employee, but as a freelance contractor. So we'll bring you in on the job, and then I have some part-time employee positions, and then the full-time positions are really reserved to those four that I just mentioned, plus Nick Buck, who is basically the other half of me when it comes to organizing all of my projects and keeping my head above water, because we get a lot of emails and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I want to respond to all of it.
You don't always respond to emails, Steve.
I know. I try. That's one of the reasons that's one of the reasons I've got Nick in place, is that he goes back and reads all of my emails that I haven't read. And he's like, hey, you got to call Bethany.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or he'll be like,
I saw him at the PTA meeting, and I was like, we're talking.
I know. So if it's happened to you, it's not personal.
Yeah, it's not personal. Steve and Nick will get back to you eventually.
We will.
So what is...
You're important to us.
I want to make sure we leave enough time to talk about your big Halloween bash, but I feel like I would be remiss if we didn't ask, what is one of the favorite projects that you've done that really sticks out to you? And you still have a huge amount of career ahead of you, but you've already done so much. What's one of your favorites?
I would say that my very favorite was a movie that I produced in 2008 with Jeff Woltrowski called It Came From Yesterday, which you can buy on Amazon. And
we'll put a link in the podcast notes.
Awesome. Yeah, It Came From Yesterday. And it's an awesome movie. Jeff is a brilliant screenwriter and director, and he and I produced it together, and then of course he stars in it. So he's another one of these, quintuple threat kind of dudes. And it's like a tongue-in-cheek kind of Sky Captain of Tomorrow meets Indiana Jones action adventure sort of creature comedy.
Okay.
So we made a bunch of cool monsters for it and did a lot of cool practical effects. But then we shot the entire movie on a green screen, and so every environment in the movie is built in the computer. Most of it, 98% of it, by me. And so that was a movie where we had shot the entire movie. And then I learned how to use Maya, which is the program that you need to build CG environments. And so Jeff, again, to his credit, he just understood. So it started with him storyboarding it exactly the way he wanted the movie, so that we had this Bible that as we shot the movie, we had 2 cameras, and the camera operators were able to just leaf through this book, know what the next shot was that they were supposed to line up. And then that also then served as a guide that once we were in a virtual environment, I was able to line up the shots as per the camera information that we had from the storyboards. But most projects that I work on, I feel like not to pontificate too much about this, but I feel like there's the art and there's the artwork. The artwork is the final thing that you make, and the art is the process of making it, to me. That's my separation. So the art for me is always the same process. which is to pour myself into it completely and try to make the coolest thing that I can and love on everybody while I'm doing it, and just to bring something into the world that did not exist before. Then there's the artwork, and that's what someone's paying me for. That's me showing up on set with the monster I made or whatever like that. And that happens at varying levels of success. Sometimes we're super successful. Sometimes we're less successful than we would like to be. All the time we're ready to put our name on it, and we're proud of what we've done. But when you start an artistic enterprise, you have a vision for it, you know, and you know where you're going with it. And if you fall a little short of that, you're still like, man, you know what? That was still awesome. And the person was thrilled and gave us the balance for the job. But we came out of it not feeling like it was quite the color red we wanted or something like that. But It Came From Yesterday was the one time still in my career that I can say that at the end of it, what we had produced was actually way cooler than what I thought we would ever be able to create, given our limited resources and our limited knowledge in the type of film that we wanted to make. So that at the end of it, you know, it was very fulfilling from an artistic standpoint, because I felt the entire time like Jeff and I, in 3 years of production, not had one single fight. Not one.
Wow.
Not one.
Wow.
Yeah. There's like nobody
life
else on
goals
earth I can
for
really
you
say
now.
that about. You know what I mean?
That's a great collaboration then.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, we were both looking at this thing saying, wow, man, look at what we made. And then we got it distributed, which also never happens. Thanks to Adrienne Weir, who is one of the best filmmakers in Pittsburgh. She did The Bread, My Sweet, the first movie I ever worked on. And she was instrumental in Panorama Entertainment helping us to secure them through distribution.
So it came from yesterday.
It came from yesterday.
We'll put a link in the podcast notes for people. And so speaking of creating something from nothing and having it create, exist in the world, tell us about this Halloween Bash that you have coming up, because we're pretty darn excited about it, and I want to make sure that everybody out there knows that it's going on.
Yeah. Okay. So it's getting more and more exciting all the time. So the idea is that we're going to have a block party around our effect shop on Halloween night, starting at 6 with trick or treating and stuff. And the idea is that about a year ago, the city had called me and said, we are going to plan through the month of October next year Romero Lives event. They didn't know what it was called yet. That was part of a whole process that we went through. But they wanted to create a tribute to George Romero through the month of October. And they were reaching out to a number of companies, and was there anything that we were already planning, or something that we thought would be cool that we could honor George with? And we had already been thinking about a Halloween party, but it's always been internal. Like, we had one last year, and it's, as external as it got is basically the fog rolling out of the door. Someone stepping outside to have a cigarette.
What's happening over there?
Yeah, exactly. But so we thought maybe it would be cool to make the party bigger, So we started planning this block party. So at its root, the idea is that it's part of Romero Lives.
Okay.
And you can learn more about Romero Lives at romerolives.org. And it is being run primarily by Suze Romero and GARF, which is the George A. Romero Foundation.
Okay.
And the city of Pittsburgh, as an effort to create a tribute to George, and just for us all to gain a deeper understanding of the art that he created and then left behind for us. And so that's the center of our bash, is that we're celebrating George Romero, which obviously means, especially since we're in the film business, means that we're celebrating film. So it is also a celebration of film in Pittsburgh. And because we live in Beachview, a neighborhood that we're trying to make awesome,
Yep.
I've lived here for 20 years, and I have always seen a vision for Beachview that could be super cool. And that is what it is, but cooler, you know, not necessarily like whatever Starbucks, Whole Foods kind of a thing. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with those kind of neighborhoods, but I would like to live in a neighborhood that was, more of what I have lived around for the past 20 years, but with like monster shops and sweet podcast studios and, and people like Atlas Development who are really trying to make an effort to turn this neighborhood into a place where the people who are already here can continue to stay here and just be really proud of where they are, instead of always saying, you never heard of Beachview?
Yeah, we're like the best little place nobody's heard of.
I'm telling you.
When we were at that event, one of the women next to me, she's like, wow, with Tolin FX there and The Current right here and Sorgatron Media right there, she said, Beachview's turning into Little Hollywood.
Exactly, yeah.
And I said, I will take that.
Yeah,
I like
and it's
that.
not a gentrified. We're not like ripping anybody's houses down and building, luxury apartments. We're just trying to make it cool.
Well, hopefully this event will bring people in. And I heard it's more than just film, too. I mean, I have seen the city there walking out what I believe is going to be a wrestling ring. Is there truth to this rumor?
Yep, so we got all kinds of cool events that we're doing. So here's how the schedule of cool stuff goes.
Okay.
Bring your kid by for trick-or-treating between 6 and 8 because they get to check out a cool monster shop. It's just part of their trick-or-treating as it is. Maybe it's on your way up to partake in the Halloween parade, which is going to start, I think, at 8 further up. Closer to Dormont. I think St. Catharines.
Yeah, it starts at St.
Check the
Catharines.
details on the parade. We're not 100% with the parade, but we want to be in the parade, so we're gonna be participating in that. But so swing through, have your kids, pin the pin on Pinhead and bob for apples in a big bucket of baby doll parts.
Nice.
And get your candy and whatever. They're too scared to come in. We got some candy outside too, whatever. And then we're gonna do sort of a proclamation of our own around 8 o'clock and just. Tell everybody from the center stage of a giant wrestling ring that we're going to have at the corner of Realty and Coast and Broadway, what it is that we're doing here, and we're going to unveil a statue of George Romero, a bust that Kyle has been working on for the past couple months, that Suze just came to the shop yesterday and gave us a couple notes on so that we can make sure that it's as George as we can possibly make it. And I don't think she's going to be able to make that night, but she is going to, we are going to have an unveiling of the statue. And then we got some other stuff. We got Doug Bradley's going to be showing up and reading poetry of Edgar Allan Poe as part of his Spine Chiller series, which is super cool. Doug Bradley's the man. And the Lucha Libre wrestling, which is different than luchador wrestling. Just do your homework, guys, and figure out what that means.
Lucha Libre. Another
Lucha
link
Libre.
we could have in the podcast.
Yeah, because Mike Aponte is organizing that for me, and the Beachview Brawl is what he kind of focuses on there. And he's Puerto Rican. That's the difference, just in case anybody wants a little wants a tip on what the difference is. So wrestling, and then it's going to be we're going to have Only Flesh is going to be doing like suspension artwork, and there's going to be tons of music and tons of juggling and magic and all kinds of fire.
Food trucks.
Mad food trucks, yeah. And tents, like vendor tents and everything. If you're an artist and you're interested in having a tent and you got a tent, come set up here. I'm not charging anybody for it. I just want it to be awesome. A food truck, you guys got a food truck, you want to come set up your food truck, reach out to us, TolinFX.com. You can find my phone number on there. Reach out to us.
If you email Steve and can't get a hold of him, email me. I'll walk over. I'll let Steve know.
I am reachable.
No, I'm
you
just
just
kidding.
sometimes
Steve's
might
great.
have to be creative about how you do that.
Your door's always open. I mean,
It is always open. You can just walk right in.
I've seen
if you didn't
people,
email me, come on in. And
I've
yo,
read it.
Steve.
We could have just walked across the street.
Yeah, it's because I've seen people walk by and kind of do a double take and then literally like pop like their heads in, and I've seen your staff go, come on in, look around, like it's fine.
Yeah, because what we love about that is that we're in the thick of it, and to have somebody come in who has never seen that stuff, it reminds us of why what we do is so cool. Because sometimes you're like, man, I can't get this little thing to work. I'm so frustrated with my job. But then somebody comes in and is like, whoa, you make monsters for a living? You're like, oh yeah, right. I make monsters for a living. I'll figure this thing out. Everything's gonna be great. It always is. And it's nice to be able to connect with the community that way. And Mike Aponte has also set up a barbershop in our studio. So you can go get your haircut with Mike. And that has extended our sense of community because we're plugging into all kinds of groups of people that were not coming into our shop before.
A barbershop inside of a special effects shop.
Yeah, they're in our...
Sounds like a movie plot.
Yeah. It's in our makeup room. We're working on our Sweeney Todd decoration now.
When people walk by and they come in your shop, do they ever, just people off the street, decide to critique your work? And they're like, hey, you call that a werewolf? What is that?
I have never had that happen. I've had that happen where I've set up places before, where you got some smartass who just wants to, whatever. But that's cool. Art is subjective. Yeah. If Face Off taught me nothing else, it's that art is subjective.
We did have from the chat room. Alex out there is asking if you have a favorite haunted house. Do you frequent haunted houses around the town?
You would think I would. You would think that I was the kind of person who was really into horror and stuff, and I'm just not. Obviously, Scare House has got it going on. I mean, Scott Simmons has got an operation. It's not even just like the best haunted house in Pittsburgh. It is the best haunted house for states around, as far as I know. I mean, Guillermo del Toro is coming to go through his haunted house. That's got to tell you something. I think it was Martin Lawrence, right?
Yeah, Martin Lawrence was there a couple weeks ago when I was there.
Wow. Yeah. And Scott's super cool, and you can tell, man. You can tell by his sweater that he's the same kind of person I'm talking about, which is somebody who is all about, loving and creating, and that's why it has been so successful. I feel like he's probably doing it for the right reasons. But I was involved with 100 Acre Manor at one point when I worked for a company called Spectre Studios, and 100 Acre Manor has a cool operation going on out there. They do a lot of work with Animal Friends, which is a really cool part of their haunted house. But honestly, for haunted houses, the coolest part is making one, And I think Aaron Parkus is doing some escape room kind of haunted house stuff. He's a local artist that doesn't get enough attention. He does all kinds of cool. He's one of the guys who works with me sometimes. He does all kinds of really cool fabrications, and he's a
speaking
great
of
designer.
Beachview, he's right
And he's
downstairs
right
here and just walked in.
Oh, he did. Nice.
Everybody,
Also-
you should move to Beachview. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Steve, for coming on and talk to us today. Really, everybody, Halloween. So, what time do the festivities start?
At 6.
At 6.
Till 11.
6 to 11, Halloween night.
Right. Turns into Burning Man at 8:30. So not kid friendly after like 8:30.
Okay, sounds like
I mean,
my
you
house.
can bring your kid. It's just, I'm
We
not
will
going to tell you how to
judge you.
parent. I will be judging you. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's awesome, Steve. Thank you so much, Tolin FX. One final question. So, this squib apparatus, your squib, that could simulate somebody getting shot. Is that rentable? Like, if you wanted to extract revenge on your enemies?
No, that was a
or
horrible
no?
pain in my ass. We did rentals, and what happened is every one of them came back in a puddle of blood, broken.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it
happen.
just became this nightmare where it was like, basically it's of no value to me anymore. The security deposit can't possibly cover the cost of the thing.
So the average person is not like your average Joe should not have access to a squib. This is professional equipment, but if you need it for a reason and you have a professional to run it,
Yeah, it is more. No, it's not like that. It's like anybody can use it. Like I literally have a YouTube video of my 4-year-old putting a squib on Kyle and shooting him.
we'll put that in the podcast notes too.
Yeah. So easy a 4-year-old can do it. And so really, no, the idea is that it's accessible to anybody who has a couple of bucks. It's not a cheap thing, but you can reuse it thousands of times. So if this is what you want to do, and you're making lots of movies where people get shot, or horror movies, or because you can, we've done use the same equipment to make a clown get shot with a bunch of glitter that comes out of them. The ground can get shot,
That's
and
just
you
what I thought happened when
and you
clowns
spray
got
dirt. Yeah, that's what we always thought. But so it does a bunch of different stuff. So it's basically a potato gun meets a squirt gun, and any way that you can come up with to use it, and you got a couple $100 to drop on it, then you should get one.
So basically,
or 2.
yeah, or 3.
Or 3.
Is there a bulk discount? No, I'm just kidding.
There
So,
is.
Yeah, if anybody out there has any creative needs that they need filled, call Steve. Him and his
Yeah,
shop
please.
will definitely come up with a solution for you. And make sure you check out his Halloween event. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna wrap up really fast. Hardy, did you have anything to add before I just give some people some places to maybe go this weekend?
Just that the new issue 6 of the Pittsburgh Current comes out this coming Tuesday, and we are focusing on the Carnegie International.
Yes.
And you can find our Pittsburgh Current Art Noir guide to Pittsburgh during the events of the Carnegie International. So make sure you pick that up. It's going to be a good issue as well as a large issue. So
It's gonna be a great issue.
tons of art content coming out in this next issue.
Yeah, lots of art. And if you're interested in to see what's going on, not just with the Carnegie International, but in and around the city in conjunction with it, make sure you pick up our next issue. And then a couple things about this weekend. Of course, Pens play the Capitals tonight for our opener. I think they will be without. Is it Wilson a Capital? The guy that just got suspended? Mike's like, I do not know hockey. Don't look at me. One thing I do know Mike likes that's happening on Friday is Insane Clown Posse's in town. Speaking of clowns, I wonder if they would emit glitter.
They should buy some squibs.
They should buy a squib for their
They
show.
actually saw Only Flesh at the Gathering of the
Oh, get outta here.
Juggalos.
That's
so
awesome.
kind of
Yeah,
comes
Rev's
together.
cool dude.
Yeah,
like him.
Mike Sorgatron Sorgatron Media is a big ICP. He was just at the Gathering.
Unfortunately, I'll be on town. But
Well, they will be here at the Rex on Friday.
worth a show. It is a show.
Yeah.
It's a really good show. It's a very sticky show. If you like the guar kind of thing, it's going to be a fun one for you.
I wonder if they know to backlight their blood.
I bet they do.
I bet
Guar
they
does.
do. Guar does, yeah.
Guar does. I've watched with that in mind, and they definitely know how to
You're watching
backlight
to say
their
they
blood.
better get this
Yeah.
right. I'm calling them. There's a wrestling event. Speaking of wrestling, Mike, I know you're also big into the wrestling scene here. IWC has a wrestling event Saturday, and you said that's in Elizabeth.
That's in Elizabeth. It's going to be a big show. They're having a few decent names, at least in the indie wrestling promotion, but also former WCW announcer Gary Michael Capetta is going to be there with his Beyond Body Slams. This was, I guess, it was in an improv theater last year. over in the East End, and they're going to be doing it before the show as kind of a separate show here. That's in Elizabeth at Court Time Sports Center. You can find information for that and the Unbreakable 2018, which is going to involve, I think, a 6-way ladder match. Over at iwcwrestling.com. And also, there's plenty of wrestling around, including our friends at Rise Wrestling down in Lamont Furnace at the old mall. It's really cool. They do wrestling in an old movie theater that they've kind of converted for their purposes, like cool. An old Carmike theater down there, and other pro wrestling. We have listings over at pittsburghwrestling.com if you want to check out that.
Right.
There's a ton of wrestling every weekend.
All weekend. And then I'm gonna end with one that if you're of a certain age will excite you. The Bullet Boys are coming to Jurgles. The 80s band. The 80s band, the Bullet.
Okay.
The first concert I ever saw was Motley Crue and the Bullet Boys at Mellon Arena
That's
in
awesome.
80. But the Bullet Boys are coming with Enough's Enough Wednesday to Jurgles. So bust out your Aquanet. Maybe make it a girls' night. Drink some Jolly Rancher laced Zimas and have a grand old time. So always.
Do you mind if I mention also that
No.
this weekend at the Biome is the remastered Night of the Living Dead? It's the first event of Romero Lives, and
Okay, yes,
and I'm
absolutely.
gonna be there.
Oh.
Me and my wife Erica will be there, and Suze Romero will be there, and it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be the first time in a long time that you've been able to see Night of the Living Dead not as a grainy black and white, but as George had shot it.
Cool. And I'm assuming tickets are on sale, so I'll put the ticket
Yeah,
link in there
exactly.
too.
Yep.
And then also Sweeney Todd opens this weekend
Sweeney Todd.
at
Yeah,
Lincoln Park
exactly.
in Midland. So, I mean,
Oh,
October is great for events.
also, we have a show in Pittsburgh Festival of Firsts called the White Album, and so that is also opening this weekend. Now that I think about it, this is a big weekend.
Like, do you have a body double? You could probably just make one. If you-
Nick,
Oh yeah.
it's Nick.
Awesome. Well, lots to do. We'll make links in the podcast notes so people could keep up. Check out his movie. It came from yesterday. Stop up at his shop. If you have any creative needs that need filled, Steve's your guy. If you want to talk gore, Steve's your guy. You guys got a great thing going over there. Thank you for being a part of Beachview and for coming on today in general. I cannot wait for the Halloween event.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, if you haven't picked up issue 5 yet, pick it up today. We got our great Brian Messer Pens preview. Get y'all ready for the Capital game tonight. Go Pens. And hey, Mike, I guess that's it. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye. I always just sit here awkwardly till he says we're done.
You're done.